Good morning. We're going to start welcoming everybody to Gov Directions Focus on Federal, the American Rescue Plan. And we'll get started here just a quick minute. This is going to be a replay of a session we held earlier in the week. We had a little bit of problem with the power, and so we decided to go in and reschedule it and conduct it again for our membership. And this will be a recorded version that we'll make available online, and we'll get that started right now. Once again, good morning. My name is Mark. I'm with Gov Directions. I'm one of the founders of Gov Directions. And what we're going to do today is focus on federal government and the American Rescue Plan. This is a series that we do with discussions about federal government spending and appropriations at the state and local government level. This is a Zoomcast through our Gov School platform, broadcasting live today on YouTube as well. As most of us know, there's been a lot of appropriations conducted over the past year, and we've done this routinely at Gov Directions. We, of course, are located in Atlanta, and we've been in this sector since 1998 with the leading publisher of local, state, and federal government contract information and resources for cities, counties, school systems, state agencies, and federal government contract listings that they've published. Providing that information to our membership, some 101,000 registered users throughout the United States and Canada. We'll deliver just over 1.6 million listings to those companies via a daily personalized match system. Today's agenda, we're going to talk about the overall marketplace, an overview of COVID spending in the past year, and talk about just generally about past performance research and how to go about doing that to make sure that you're in the right price point when you go in to bid on an individual contract. And then we always leave an open microphone session just to point out that if you do ask questions for privacy reasons, make sure you protect yourself. This is a recorded version. Recent legislative action in the COVID-19 spending occurred first really with HR 6074. There was an $8.3 billion appropriation. This was initial about this time last year when it really started pumping some money into to address the issue. This is primarily immediate resources that were in place that help with setting up testing and putting money into testing for COVID related. I always refer back to the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office link. These are publications that are online that allow you to come in and do an analysis of actually where the spending's at. In addition, we don't really focus in on the politics of Gov Directions. What we try to do is focus in on the procurement items or action items that they have funded, and then lead you to that source of revenue, because this is where most of the action is at. Even though it's appropriated at the federal government levels, oftentimes procured at the state or even the local government. For example, if there's going to be funding set up for testing services in a community, they might have a drive-in or drive-by, and they may rent tents, that need the actual supplies, the furniture. All those items are traditionally procured and then used in a community. And while we thought that $8.3 billion was a good investment, we did come back right away with a $192 billion measure that went more nationwide as the disease did spread. And the impact accordingly. HR 6201 was one of the largest spending measures for a public pandemic situation that we've seen, and then but still did not really address the impact we saw almost immediately once we had government the shutdown to our economy and other parts that were impacted. So the Congress came back with HR 748. Which is a $1.8 trillion measure, one of the largest at that time spending measures. And the monies really started pushing up as they looked at direct appropriations to individuals and companies, but still a significant portion of that was for allocation to agencies who were procuring goods and services from the private sector. The private sector is actively engaged in this effort. And we wanted to, and we always call attention to that part of it. We set through, that was a large appropriation. And then we still more, as we really got a handle on the disease and the measurements there. Let's see, 1 second here. And so we saw there the really appropriation of those funds actively sent out to the marketplace, and dealing with items that were necessary to address the pandemic. And then more recently, as we sort of got into the part where the actual vaccination effort was into place, we saw an additional appropriation of $489 billion. While this also supplemented the PPP program, it included some $100 billion that went into expanding the COVID-19 testing measures and purchasing of PPE and also replenishing inventories around the country. This past month, like a couple of weeks, about a week ago now, that we saw in the final measure we've looked at, and that's HR 1319. That's a $1.9 trillion appropriation. It includes measurements in all areas. It was actually a supplemental appropriations bill through the reconciliation process and method to actually get funds out to our organizations at the local and state level directly to them quicker. The analysis there is at CBO. I don't think I'll stop here and kind of show you some of those documents that you would actually use in this process. And then within that, there's also a $350 billion appropriation for state, local, and tribal government relief. And that's in the congressional budget area. Those monies will be then used to supplement activities at our state government level. Some direct appropriations, of course, are there, but it's for certain organizations based on size. And there's still some hand-wringing on that in terms of how that money is going to be sent through the process and what population numbers are actually enforced in the distribution of those funds. But all meant to help those governments deal with the lasting effects of the pandemic. And so when you go in and you actually look at an analysis of an individual piece of legislation, you go to the congressional congress.gov, for example, and you can actually pull up the HR number. It's generally pretty easy to use. A lot of times they'll go in and have a lot of amendments. I mean, you don't need to necessarily focus in on all that detail, but you can go in and do your research. There were some 40 roll call votes on this particular piece of legislation. And you could go in though, and then it'll speak to the actual summary on the first page. And you can see this bill impacted a number of different departments, including agriculture and nutrition programs for SNAP, schools and institutions of higher education. I'm going to focus on education today. COVID-19 vaccinations, mental health, disorder services, housing assistance programs, all areas that local, state, and federal contractors are working within, with these funds of which are being used to procure in the private sector marketplace. So a combination of public and private sector involvement. And it also includes direct appropriations for individuals and recovery, and those funds are actually being distributed now. We don't really focus on that side of the public spending, but more on the procurement side. And when you watch, you'll get announcements out that will help summarize a particular appropriation. When President Trump was in office, his office did this. Now President Trump, you can go in and you can actually read. They read past some of the political influence of the comments on the documents, but they're going in and to actually look at the details by paragraph and subparagraph, and you'll find procurement items sort of hidden in those areas, and pay close attention to that, and then follow the flow of that. It'll talk about the individual department, and then those individual departments have agencies in the states that they're working with, and the states have local governments that they're working with. In the emergency legislative package, I'm going to speak to that in just a minute about how the procurement of those items actually work. In the CBO, you actually will see some more detailed appropriation numbers, but that document will have tables associated with it. In those tables, it'll talk about the individual departments and where those funds are actually at. Oftentimes, it'll speak to if there's a particular item, for example, in this bill, it's going to speak to HVAC type transactions that are being procured at the school district level, and those impacts of that. And so it's important to do your analysis so that whenever you walk into a community, You can speak the language, you can speak the procurement, you can speak the grants that potentially are available to fund your project and your services and to help you out in that process. In addition, GovDirections maintains a blog. It's at govdirections.com/blog. And we build that in within your daily distribution of information and that we send to you in your daily alert. But we also come in and analyze it, focusing specifically on the details of the actual departments and the amounts of monies that are available there. And we drive those in the sense that the discussion about where the procurement items are really at. So you see this more recent timeline for the relief package that was passed. This is probably typical in an emergency situation. It was a really relatively quick process once it was announced. And they did that by going through the actual reconciliation. And in the blog, we explained what that really means. And so as part of that, when you get into the details of the items and in the process of explaining that, you can go in there and you can actually read why that makes a difference. You know, if you standalone package, potentially there's a delay in the actual execution of that. In the supplemental appropriations or the Reconciliation Act, you can actually get in there quicker and move that money through the federal process even faster. And so those bids, those RFPs are really starting to get on the street already. And so we do speak to that in the blog and where you need to be at. And so, you know, what we saw this past year was a move from a $4.5 trillion marketplace to a $3 trillion addition initially. And then we saw an additional roughly $3 trillion in the more recent days. So we're looking at really almost a doubling of the procurement side of the public federal space to a $7.5 trillion spending level just in 1 year. And so that's a lot of money flowing through a very fragmented government marketplace. We use this chart here to illustrate the process of governing ourselves. Oftentimes like a puzzle box, we take the pieces, thousands of pieces sometimes, and we pull them together at GovDirections to make it somewhat simple and easy to view and look at. RFPs and bids from some 35,000 cities and towns, 3,000 counties, 12,000 plus school system. In fact, that number is probably closer to more 17,000 different types of school related organizations that we're now funding to allow us to educate our children in different ways. Then we like to use a lot of special districts, and special districts are sometimes hidden gems in the process of going after the federal government sector money. Those projects will be funded by the federal government and then pushed down to organizations like, for example, we are here in Atlanta, the Grady Hospital system is a system that's led by a couple of other governments. Oftentimes we even see some organizations that have not only the public side, but the private side. Fragmented, not broken by any sense, but it's a method for them to get the federal dollars that they're appropriating out to the local government, your local area in a very quick way. What I want to do today in our focus on federal is speak to one particular agency, and this is the Department of Education. This is a part that we're seeing very quick action. You can go into the announcement they just did on March 17th, and you can see there's some, I think the number is 10 billion to states alone for the CDC. There's 122 billion for relief to K through 12 schools. And the department is actively involved to make that happen. They're going into investing in resources in specifically in operational strategy, improving ventilation, purchasing personal protective equipment, and then providing additional space, for example, modular classroom buildings. And when we read these words, it's important that we don't really fall into the influence of political explanations, but more the procurement side of it, and taking those words and saying, here's the contract here. This is to buy an HVAC system. This is to maybe come in and evaluate the air purification, filtration, or to purchase PPE for teachers and students. And also to go out there and buy those modular classrooms, but not only that, but going in and providing cabling and wiring and other types of Wi-Fi needs and high technology, and then additional classroom educational supplies, all funded through this appropriation. So what a government was initially planning on spending, that can potentially be doubled or even tripled in some cases. And what we typically see at the local government level is a capital improvement plan. So they're looking at purchasing something over a period, maybe 4, 5, 6 years. And then whenever there's additional appropriations like this, it takes those plans and they take the more ready to go projects and push those forward in order to get those funds pulled down from the federal government and into the communities that exist. And they're encouraged to do that. And so it's important that you are aware of that. So when you go in and you're looking at a community and you're potentially trying to see how I can work with them in a business development aspect, make sure you go into that capital improvement plan, look and see what their plans are in the near term, 1, 2 years first, and then look at those maybe 3, 4 years out. And they don't only just include capital items like real estate, property development. Oftentimes here they'll talk about the purchase of buses and all the equipment that goes along with buses, for example, in a school or in a local government, the purchase of technology and other types of measures. But you'll see here speaking to other types of services and strategies for that, emotional, mental health, academic assistance. These are temporary personnel type contracts going in, helping with nursing needs in a temporary basis, or going in and helping with additional educational training mechanisms to help teachers deal with this in the local setting. But they traditionally will use external resources for that as opposed to staffing up. So these projects we see them, the education category under GovDirections is now filled. I mean, it's the highest level of education training type of RFPs that are out there. So we like to make sure you monitor for some of those. And then, the after school summer programs, they're bidding those now. Okay. These will be for extended sessions in the June, July, August. I think a lot of that could be with flavor of bringing back full-time students this coming year and help with them readjust to a setting that's more structured. And you're also seeing additional social distancing and safety protocols on buses, for example, and mechanisms. These includes like dividers, for example, plastic dividers, or safety mechanisms that are in place, potentially CCTV and other types of procurement items that are purchased. And then the Wi-Fi hotspots, there's additional funding beyond this bill for that, those type of activities to make sure that, we can even pull a school bus during the summer into a community and have it serve as a hotspot. I've seen some of those type innovative bids that are out there. If you do have an innovative project, this is actually the best time that I know in the history of myself doing this type of work in the last 30 years to actually step forward and make sure that you're able to present your product to a government and they potentially have the leeway to actually try something. And so this particular legislation, the American Rescue Plan, you see, we've seen a lot of the political part behind it when we're getting the direct appropriations, but hidden in this bill, and not so much hidden, but in a significant way, are procurement items that are actively involved in re-engaging private sector organizations to deal with this pandemic. And we like to highlight those. When you go into working with the federal government, you're going to be familiar with and start identifying the FAR rule that's associated with any individual acquisition. FAR is the Federal Acquisition Regulation at acquisition.gov. And every particular procurement listing or item, ones that are even pre-solicitation notices, those that are not yet coming, but they're developing the RFP now or announcing that acquisition, all the way to the actual solicitation award will give you a FAR number. And if you go into acquisition.gov, you go to the location, you browse the FAR, you click in, and then it'll tell you the number. For example, let's say 5.2. This is a synopsis, one I always refer back to, but you easily go in and pull it up. It's in plain language, meaning that you should be able to understand it without questioning, and should give you the information that federal procurement officer is using to decide whether or not to hire you. Acquisition.gov adheres to that. It's very important to a federal procurement officer, and they really do follow that almost like it's the Bible for acquisition. So whenever you see those, pay attention to them. They will always reference that in the announcement of the bid. In addition, when we're dealing with a disaster relief contract and a lot of the COVID-19 purchases fall up under those provisions as they speak to you, then you need to be aware of the specific FAR legislation that deals with the Thomas T. Stafford Disaster Relief Act. This was signed into law in 1988, and it was an amendment of the Act of 1974. And it does require FEMA to work with businesses located in an area when feasible and practical that's within that disaster area. Of course, for COVID-19, that's almost the national focus. But, we just saw, not to get too much off the subject, but major storms last night in Alabama and Georgia. There's going to be disaster relief, emergency assistance stepping forward with that. This is also federal procurement, traditionally through FEMA, that makes its way down to the state organizations that deal with emergency assistance. So in Alabama, they'll have the Alabama Emergency Management Group, and Georgia is the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. And if any state that you're dealing with any kind of disaster relief, you can just type in or Google your state name, and you can find that, and then the Emergency Management Agency acronym, and you should be able to locate those organizations that can assist you in procurement with emergency type transactions. But you have to be registered within the System for Award Management in order to do that. As remember, for SAM, sam.gov is the organization where you're required to actually register, and you can go in and when you do that, there's a particular part of it that's going to speak just to the disaster relief portion. So at sam.gov, once you do register, you can search your record very quickly, find your name, and it's going to drive you to the disaster response registry on the side. I'll kind of give you a quick illustration of that. When you go in here, you'd search your record. You can start searching, let's just say ABC company. There was one. And then you can pull that company up. But over here on the right-hand side is the disaster response registry search. You want to make sure that you're listed in that. Okay. And you can, when you go through your actual registration for the with SAM, you'll be driven to this particular document that's online. And as it comes up, I'll show you the printout here. It helps you make sure that you are fully able to draw down on FEMA funds, or in some organizations, they'll be directed through your state emergency management or even your county emergency management agency that you're located in. Having that data already filled out and available and approved beforehand is very important in that process. And so this registry, they'll give you all the details here for you to actually go in and fill out and complete. Making sure that's in place is important, because state and local government contracting, it can control a large portion of those activities, but they'll refer back to those databases to make sure that you're viable and that you're legit and that you're ready to go. And you'll hear that terminology over and over again. FEMA's even overwhelmed today, it looks like. But you'll hear that over and over again, ready to go, ready to go, ready to go. And that means that, the project's going to be funded quickly. We need a company that's able to provide these services and is already eligible to receive the award. So they're not going to mess around with waiting for you to get it pre-approved and so forth. So you need to have that happen now and be ready once you start registering with sam.gov. And in that process, Gov Directions, what we do, and we refer back to the actual RFPs and bids that are out there here by keyword, and you can come in. We even have some of those set up at our website at our very front page. And when you do that, you see those bids. There's COVID-19 related, there's disaster recovery, there's infrastructure, infrastructure, and we're looking at a potential $4 trillion appropriation. This will be the largest infrastructure investment in the recorded history. And so it's important that you are ready for those funds when they're approved. By all indications, that's going to be within the next couple of months based on discussion coming. You do, once again, refer back to sort of the hand wringing in the political sector, but there are the votes to make that happen. And so we fully anticipate that forthcoming. And you can also go into Gov Directions under the particular RFP categories and pull those out. And so I mentioned the safety PPE. We have actually set up 2 specific categories for COVID specific supplies and services. And when you open up those, of course, you'll have like for example, community and media application. There's one today here in Alaska, a strategic plan, and another one in Alaska. And you can see those built out by the state, school improvement. And this is more the services here, and then the supplies and not only to call attention to these type of PPE supplies, but also going down to the actual equipment purchases and for HVAC. These are our school systems here, and you can see how active this marketplace is. Hundreds of bids out there today. Okay, and making sure that you're fully aware of those. And some of those have been awarded. We do publish awards now for a 30-day cycle, so that you can quickly go in there and see those. But air handling improvements across the country. And then so we have these quick links in our document here today for you to use. And we just like to point out that we try to help you work smarter at GovDirections. And when you come into our system, it's important that we're able to provide the information to you. We retrieve it minute by minute, in fact, and then deliver it to you on an online platform in your personal account. And you can go in and type in particular keywords to help you search your industry, or you can view your account or your daily alert based on your account settings and use real quick, easy to use tools that will help you in that process. So that's a quick focus on federal this morning that we wanted to provide to you and help you in this sector. If you watch GovSchool, you come in on our schedule. And for this afternoon, we're actually going to walk through an actual RFP. This is going to be at Friday this afternoon, 1:30, and where we're going to talk about how to read an RFP and how to respond to it. This is at the same channel, and you just click on it at 1:30, and we'll be here. We're also live on YouTube TV. A lot of folks are turning in now using that platform. And then Monday morning, we'll come back and have our coffee conversation series where we're going to actually talk about the changing features of the new beta.sam.gov. They're already changing it again. It's been changed this time last year, and now we're looking at some more significant changes. And we're going to do a sort of a before and after look for you. And then we're going to have an online boot camp. This boot camp is actually filled up. There'll be an announcement of a new boot camp here shortly, but this is on March 30th from 10 a.m. to 2. And then next week we're going to do Bidwinked again. Bidwink's our fun series where we help you don't get taken advantage of. There's a lot of systems out there and may suggest that you have to pay for access to public information. And we'd like to help you with that where it's not necessary. And then coming up in early April, we'll have our Part 1 series again for GovSchool Focus, where we're going in and talking specifically about areas that we think are helpful to get you up and going. This is a little bit different our boot camp, where boot camp, when you're in that series, we want you coming out of that class ready to bid. Here is more of an explanation of the marketplace itself and where you need to go out and to look at contracting instruments, to how you pinpoint your opportunity, how you actually register in particular areas. So we invite you to watch our series, and we'll see you online again. Have a great day.